sky above Delta Prime turned red before the bombs fell. No one had warned the outpost, no alarm, no signal, just fire. Commander Reese Morrow dove into the cratered soil, shielding a young comms officer as the first shockwave hit. Dust choked the air. Structures crumbled. And then came the sound that truly chilled his spine. The deep growl of a beast that wasn't human. Reese had fought wars before, but this wasn't a war. It was a purge. Something had come from the edge of the galaxy. Not to negotiate, not to invade, but to erase, and it had sent monsters ahead of its army. He pulled himself from the rubble, clutching his pulse rifle. Around him, the unit was scattered or dead. He wasn't sure which. The jungle beyond the station burned in strange colors. Neon leaves curled inwards. Tall trees blackened and cracked as if rejecting the sky itself. Then he heard it again. That sound, a growl, but smaller this time, and not threatening. More like a whimper. He should have ignored it. He should have radioed for backup. But the war had already taken everything from him. His men, his mission, his future. Something in that cry pulled at what was left. He followed the sound through, broken metal and melted glass. Inside what used to be a research pod, he found a cage, half melted, its energy field flickering. Inside, curled in the corner, was something wrong. The creature was no bigger than a wolf, but its body was covered in armor-like scales that shimmered between black and orange. 4 glowing eyes stared at him, not with hatred, not with fear, but with confusion. One paw was injured, its breathing was heavy, but it didn't attack, it just waited. Reese lowered his rifle. It didn't make sense. The larger version of this beast had crushed tanks earlier that day. It had torn through bunkers, but this one looked lost. He approached slowly, whispering calm words he didn't even believe. The cub didn't move. When he reached the cage, it blinked once. Then it let out a sound so small, so broken, Reese froze. It wasn't just an animal. It was intelligent, maybe even more than he could guess. He disabled the lock and opened the cage. The cub didn't jump. It limped out, sniffed his hand, and pressed its head against his leg. That was the moment he knew. Whatever it was, it had chosen him. The sky lit up again. Dropships passed overhead. Alien markings glowed across their sides. Reese grabbed the cub and sprinted toward the underground shelter. As he ran, he saw something strange. The dropships weren't attacking. They were scanning. He reached the shelter door and sealed it. He turned on the emergency lights. The cub curled beside him. In the dim glow, Reese saw a strange collar around its neck. Symbols he couldn't read blinked across it. One word, however, appeared in human text beneath the alien glyphs. Royalty. His heart stopped. He looked at the creature again. A royal pet? Why was it abandoned? And if it was so important, why was it left behind during the attack? As he processed it, the cub licked his hand and closed its eyes. Reese didn't know what the war had become. He didn't know who had attacked or why, but he knew one thing now with certainty. He wasn't holding a beast, he was holding a secret. Reese sat in silence, back against the cold wall of the underground shelter. The emergency lights gave everything a soft orange glow, but his eyes stayed, fixed on the creature lying beside him. The cub's breathing had slowed. It was asleep, its head resting on his leg like a child would. The collar around its neck blinked again. The word royalty stayed on screen, unmoving like a warning. He reached out and gently turned the collar. It looked old, scratched from battles or maybe just time. Tiny wires ran across the metal. One side had been damaged, likely during the chaos above. Reese didn't dare remove it. Not yet. Not until he knew what it meant. Not until he knew who might come looking for it. He checked the supply crates. The shelter had food, water, a weak medkit, and a signal jammer that still worked. That was good. No one would find him down here easily. But it also meant he couldn't call for help either. The cub stirred, and let out a soft chirp. "It's injured." Paw trembled slightly. Reese reached for the med kit and pulled out the least broken tools he could find. He didn't know much about alien biology, but he knew pain. He'd treated worse during the border wars. Slowly, he wrapped the limb and applied the ointment, hoping it wouldn't make things worse. The cub didn't resist. It just watched him with quiet, glowing eyes. For a moment, he felt peace. Then the ground above shook again. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Reese grabbed his rifle and stood. The cub followed him, limping but alert. He moved to the reinforced camera panel and tapped the monitor. The outside view was glitchy but clear enough. 3 alien soldiers had landed nearby. They weren't scanning for survivors. They were scanning for something specific. Their movements were precise, slow, careful. One of them stopped at the edge of the crater. He raised a scanner and pointed it at the ground. Then suddenly he paused. He turned to the others and said something in a language Reese couldn't understand. But it didn't matter. Reese saw what they were doing. They weren't just searching, they were tracking. Reese turned back to the cub. It was staring at the door now as if it felt the same thing. Danger. A link had been made. Somehow they were connected. Somehow they knew the cub was still alive. He moved fast, grabbed his pack, stuffed supplies into it, and pulled the camo cloak from the locker. The shelter wouldn't hold forever. If they were tracking the cub, they would eventually break through. He crouched beside it. "We have to move," he whispered. The cub blinked once and stepped closer, as if it understood every word. Outside, the soldiers were closing in. Reese opened the escape hatch that led into the jungle tunnel system. These passages were old, built before the war. Most had collapsed, but this one still led toward the eastern cliffs. If they made it there, maybe they could find a signal, or a cave, or just time. They moved quickly through the tight tunnels. The cub kept close, never making a sound. Reese could hear his own heartbeat more than his footsteps. Every corner, every shadow felt like a trap, but they kept going. After a long stretch of silence, they emerged behind a waterfall. The cliffside path was narrow, but it gave them a view of the burning forest. Ships passed in the sky. Drones buzzed below. Reese dropped to one knee and pulled out his binoculars. Then he saw it, a large banner hanging from one of the alien dropships. The symbol on it matched the one glowing on the cub's collar, a black crown with 4 claws surrounding it. He didn't know the language, but he knew what that symbol meant. That cub wasn't just royal. It belonged to someone powerful, someone important, someone dangerous. And Reese had just become its protector. The wind howled across the cliffside as Reese tightened the straps on his pack. The cub stood beside him, its 4 glowing eyes scanning the sky. Even here, high above the burning jungle, they weren't safe. Alien scout drones flew in wide circles, below. Their humming sound echoed through the mist like warning bells. Reese pulled the camo cloak tighter around both of them. The cub didn't resist. It leaned into his side, trusting him in a way he hadn't expected. Maybe it was the bond formed under fire. Maybe the creature simply understood that he wasn't a threat. Whatever the reason, it followed without question. They began climbing toward the ridge above the waterfall. The trail was narrow and wet with sharp rocks on either side. One wrong step would send them falling. Reese helped the cub over the steeper parts, careful not to stress its injured leg. At the top, the jungle opened into a quiet plateau. The trees here glowed with soft blue lights. Strange flowers pulsed with warmth. It almost looked peaceful. But Reese knew better. He had seen peace before. This was silence, a silence that warned something was watching. He guided the cub into a small hollow beneath an ancient tree. Its roots curled above like protective arms. Reese set down his gear and activated the heat shield to mask their body signatures. As night fell, the cub curled beside him again. It didn't sleep this time. Its eyes stayed open, always alert. Reese looked at the sky, watching stars flicker through the canopy. Somewhere up there, a war was still happening. Ships were burning. Worlds were being claimed. And yet here, he was protecting something no one had expected him to find. He opened his data tablet and began scanning the collar again. This time something changed. The collar flickered, then projected a soft hologram above the cub's back. It showed a tall figure dressed in shining robes. Her face was feline, elegant, and proud. Her eyes matched the cub's exactly. Behind her stood two beasts like the one next to him, larger, armored, majestic. Then came symbols. He couldn't read them, but the translation software caught a few words. Heir, sacred bond, forbidden to harm. Rhys stared at the projection as it faded. His chest tightened. This wasn't just a royal pet. It was a direct bloodline heir. A creature the Empress herself had raised, and now it was in his care. He heard movement. Leaves rustled beyond the trees. He stood quickly, rifle raised. The wild cub growled low, not in fear but warning. From the darkness came two shapes, fast, silent, not drones, not soldiers, something else. Predators. They moved like shadows, black and lean with silver eyes. Rhys fired once, missing on purpose. A warning shot. But they didn't stop. The cub roared, not loud but sharp. The sound echoed unnaturally, like it shook the air itself. The two shadows paused, then backed away. They vanished into the forest, without a sound. Rhys looked down at the cub. Its eyes still glowed, but now something had changed. Power. Authority. Whatever it was, those creatures had recognized it. They weren't just running from danger, they were submitting. Rhys knelt slowly, placing a hand on the cub's head. "You're more than I thought," he whispered. And now the weight of what he carried was heavier than ever. Because somewhere out there the Empress would be looking for what she lost. And if she found him, he doubted she would thank him. Rhys didn't sleep that night. His eyes stayed fixed on the forest edge. Every shift in the wind, every crack of a branch made his grip tighten on the rifle. The cub rested beside him, calm now but alert. It hadn't made another sound after its roar. It didn't need to. The forest had gotten quieter. He waited until the sun started to rise. Pale blue light spilled over the trees. Rhys stood slowly, stretching stiff muscles. He knew they couldn't stay here. The plateau was open. Beautiful, yes, but too easy to track. The alien drones would sweep through, soon, and he had no way of knowing if that roar had alerted something more dangerous. He packed fast. The cub followed, limping less now. The treatment had helped. It moved with more strength, but it also stayed close to his leg like it had claimed him, like it had decided he was its protector now. They moved through thick brush and roots, heading east toward the mountain caves. Rhys had seen them marked on old maps. If they were still standing, they could provide a proper shelter. Maybe even a place to plan. As they walked, the cub stopped suddenly. It sniffed the air, then let out a low rumble. Rhys turned, weapon ready. A body lay ahead, twisted, armored, alien. The soldier had been dead for hours. The armor was burned on one side. Strange claw marks cut across the chest. But Rhys noticed something more important. The insignia on the chest was different. This one had two crowns, not one. The cub growled softly. Rhys stepped forward and searched the body. He found a small device clipped to the belt. It was still active. A tracker. It blinked in a steady red pulse. He crushed it under his boot. Then he saw the small print on the soldier's wrist. Not a language he could read, but one symbol was clear. It matched the collar. Whoever this soldier had been, he wasn't just a regular tracker. He had been Royal Guard. The Empress was searching already. They were closing in. Rhys picked up the pace, guiding the cub through tighter jungle paths, keeping low, avoiding open areas. Birds scattered as they passed. The leaves shimmered from moisture. Strange glowing insects danced around them, but none attacked. It was almost like the jungle itself respected the cub. Hours passed before they reached the base of the mountains. Sharp cliffs rose above, jagged and dark. A narrow trail curved upward into the rock. Rhys climbed with care, pulling the cub up when needed. Near the top they found it. A cave mouth wide and deep. Vines draped across it like curtains. Inside, cool air moved quietly. The space was large enough to hide them for now. He cleared the entrance and checked for signs of danger. There were old tracks, no recent activity. It was safe enough. Inside the cave, he built a quick heat barrier and dropped his gear. The cub wandered deeper in, sniffing the shadows. It found a raised stone and leaped onto it, curling into a resting pose, like it had done this before. Rhys watched it and exhaled for the first time in hours. He turned on his tablet again. The collar synced once more. This time a message came, through, translated into broken English. Empress seeks the bonded cub. Return or face extinction. All planets will burn until she is found. Rhys stared at the words. His hands tightened. The message had been sent across wide frequencies. Anyone who found the cub was expected to give it up, or die. He looked at the cub. It yawned once, then rested its head on its paws. He could give it back. He could walk away. But something inside him knew he wouldn't. Not because he was stubborn, but because the creature wasn't just a pet anymore, it was family. And he didn't give up family. The message played on repeat. Rhys shut off the tablet and stared into the dark corner of the cave. He could still hear the words in his head. Return the bonded cub, or extinction would follow. It didn't sound like a bluff. It sounded like a threat made by someone who had already destroyed worlds just to find one creature. The cub slept peacefully, unaware of what it was worth. Or maybe it knew and didn't care. Maybe it trusted him too much now to feel fear. That was what made Rhys more afraid, not the Empress, not her ships, but the bond forming between them. He had seen it before in soldiers who adopted strays during long campaigns. He had felt it in rescue missions where someone refused to leave a fallen comrade behind. It was loyalty, unbreakable, dangerous. He stood and walked to the cave's mouth. The jungle stretched far below. In the distance, smoke curled into the sky from the wrecked outpost. He saw small ships patrolling the skies, scanning the ground. They were looking for a signal. Looking for him. He couldn't hide forever. But he couldn't give the cub up either. That night, Rhys worked on rebuilding the collar's functions. If he could control the signal, maybe he could mislead the trackers, or send false pings. The interface was complex, half-organic, and pulsing with power. It was alive in some way he didn't understand. But the more he worked, the more the collar responded to him. He didn't notice at first, but the cub had moved closer. It sat beside him quietly, eyes watching his fingers. Then slowly, it placed one paw on his wrist. A pulse shot through the collar. The projection flared again. But this time, it wasn't the Empress. It was a memory. Rhys saw a younger cub, smaller than the one he sheltered now, running through tall gardens of glowing stone. A tall figure, the Empress herself chased after it. Not as a ruler, but like a mother. Her laughter echoed through the vision. Warm, proud. The cub leaped into her arms and she held it close. Then the vision turned. Flames, screaming, betrayal, soldiers dragging her away, the cub trapped in a pod. A command was given. Hide the heir. Destroy the transport. Let no one find it. The pod had crash-landed near Rhys's outpost. It hadn't been abandoned. It had been protected. The memory faded. Rhys sat frozen. The cub looked up at him. Not like an animal, but like someone who remembered too. He understood. Now, the Empress hadn't lost the cub by accident. She had hidden it to save it. Someone had tried to take power. Someone had sent armies to kill a child. And now they were burning worlds to finish what they started. Rhys stood, heart pounding. He had to find out who was behind it. And to do that, he needed help. He opened the tablet and searched old contacts. There was one name he hadn't erased. A former intelligence officer. Retired. Lived off-grid in the deep wetlands of Thalos Prime. If anyone knew what was going on behind royal walls, it was her. But getting there would be hard. The enemy already controlled the skies. He looked at the cub. I need you to trust me, he said. The cub lowered its head in agreement. They had one chance, one route through the caves that led to the river system. If they could reach the water, undetected, they could travel by night, hiding from heat scans. It was dangerous, risky, but it was their only shot. Rhys packed what little gear he had left. The cub stood beside him, stronger now, walking without a limp. The jungle outside still burned in patches, but somewhere beyond the fire was the truth and maybe a way to stop the galaxy from turning to ash over one bond. The cave tunnels narrowed as Rhys moved deeper underground. The cub stayed close, its eyes glowing softly in the darkness. They had been walking for over an hour now, climbing down crumbling steps and passing through chambers lit only by the faint blue light of moss on the walls. Rhys had no map, only memory. He had studied the terrain years ago when he served on border patrol. Back then, these tunnels were marked as unstable and off-limits. Now they were the only path to survival. They reached a cavern with a broken bridge stretching across, a black void. The air was damp and cold. Water dripped from high above. Rhys stopped and looked across the gap. Part of the bridge had collapsed, but a narrow ledge remained. It could hold his weight. Maybe. He looked at the cub. Its frame had grown over the past days, stronger, more alert. It stared at the gap without fear. "We'll take it slow," Rhys whispered. He stepped first, pressing his boots carefully on the ledge. One step, then another. The stone groaned beneath him, but held. The cub followed, placing its paws exactly where his feet had gone. Halfway across, Rhys heard the sound, a sharp metallic ping, a motion sensor. He grabbed the cub and rolled forward just as something exploded behind them. The ledge broke. Rocks fell into the darkness. Rhys and the cub landed hard on the other side, covered in dust and bruises. He coughed and checked the creature for wounds. Nothing serious. They had triggered a trap. Not natural. Someone had rigged these tunnels. He stood quickly and scanned the ceiling. Lights flickered on above. Not jungle light, electric, artificial. Then came the voice. "You really shouldn't be here, Commander." A spotlight snapped on. A figure stepped forward from the shadows of the far wall. It was her, Commander Vela Arden, ex-intelligence, decorated, feared, and officially dead. She hadn't died. She had gone dark. "Vela," Rhys said. "You always had a problem with orders," she replied. She held a small pistol, aimed but relaxed. Rhys stepped in front of the cub. "I need answers." Vela's eyes flicked to the creature. "I figured you'd be the one to find it." She waved for him to follow. "Come. I'll explain before the next trap resets." They walked into a control room built into the side of the cavern. Screens showed surveillance feeds, old tech, patched together with newer alien parts. Vela handed him a drink and sat on a cracked crate. "You know what it is," she said. Rhys nodded. "Then you know why they're hunting it." "I know the Empress hid it." "No," she said. "The Empress didn't send that pod. Her sister did, to save the heir, after the coup." Rhys froze. "What coup?" Vela leaned forward. "The Empress is gone, Rhys. Has been for months. Her twin sister sits on the throne, the one who ordered the heir's death. That cub is the rightful ruler, and you're holding the proof." The room felt colder now. "They'll burn every colony just to kill it," Rhys said. "Yes, unless we stop them." Vela pulled up a map on the dusty screen. "There's an old rebel frequency, still active. If we reach the tower on the ocean cliffs, we can send a broadcast across the quadrant. Show the cub's memory, the proof, force the council to respond." Rhys looked at the cub. It stared at the screen, as if it understood every word. "They'll send everything they have," he said. Vela smiled. "Then we give them a fight they won't forget." Rhys nodded. They had a new mission now: protect the heir, expose the lie, and take the fight to the throne. The sun had barely risen when Rhys stepped out of the cave with the cub at his side. Behind them, Commander Vela followed with a large pack strapped to her back and a rifle slung across her shoulder. The jungle was quieter now. Too quiet. Even the birds had stopped singing. They were 3 days from the ocean cliffs, 3 days to reach the signal tower buried in an old rebel outpost. 3 days to send the truth to the galaxy. Rhys kept his eyes on the sky. He saw no drones. But that meant nothing. The enemy was no longer sending scouts. They were preparing for something bigger. He could feel it in the way the air changed. The wind had a weight now, heavy with warning. They moved fast through the brush, stopping only when the cub needed rest. Its strength had returned. The injury was almost gone. It ran ahead sometimes, sniffing trails and circling back. Its instincts were sharper than any tracker drone. On the second night, they camped near a shattered riverbed. Vela lit a fire with low-flame fuel to avoid smoke. They ate quietly. Rhys noticed the cub watching the stars. It tilted its head, following a group of lights moving slowly across the sky. A fleet. Rhys stood and looked closer. Dozens of alien ships in perfect formation. No blinking lights. No communication signals. Silent invasion. "They're headed for the cliffs," Vela said. "They know," Rhys replied. "They're going to bomb the tower before we get there." Rhys looked at the cub. "Then we go faster." The next day, they reached the edge of a dry canyon. The only path forward was through the valley, but it was exposed. High rocks on both sides made it perfect for an ambush. Vela pulled out her binoculars and scanned the ridge. "We've got movement, 2 squads. Rhys checked his rifle. They didn't have time to sneak around, and they couldn't afford a full fight. "We go loud," he said. Vela grinned. They moved in a tight formation. Rhys and Vela took the front while the cub followed close behind. The moment they stepped into the canyon, the enemy opened fire. Plasma bolts rained down from both sides. Rhys rolled behind a boulder and returned. Fire. Vela ducked and tossed a flash mine. Then the cub leapt. It moved faster than either of them had ever seen. It shot forward with a roar that shook the stone walls. In one jump, it landed on the ridge and tore through the attackers with claw and fang. The aliens screamed and scattered. A few fired back, but the cub twisted midair and dodged the blasts. Within minutes, the ridge was silent. Rhys climbed up to check. The cub stood at the top, chest rising and falling, eyes burning with fire. But it wasn't wild. It was focused. Controlled. It didn't kill for fun. It killed to protect. Vela reached the ridge and looked at the scene. "This thing's not just royal," she said. "It's a weapon." Rhys didn't answer. He looked out toward the cliffs. In the distance, he saw the signal tower's broken peak rising above the trees. Almost there. But a new shape moved in the sky. Bigger. Slower. A command ship. A royal vessel, black and gold, shaped like a winged crown. It was heading straight for the tower. "They're coming to finish it themselves," Vela whispered. Rhys looked at the cub. "Then so are we." The 3 of them began running through the canyon, smoke rising behind them. The galaxy was about to watch a war ignite from a single truth, and the air was ready to roar again. The signal tower stood like a broken tooth on the cliff's edge. Wind whipped against its metal bones, and the ocean far below roared as waves slammed against the rocks. Rhys, Vela, and the cub climbed the last steps, breathing hard. The control room was still intact, though dark and cracked from age. Rhys kicked open the door. Dust filled his lungs. The console blinked weakly, running on backup power. Wires sparked from the ceiling. A shattered screen showed static. "This place is barely holding together," Vela said. "It'll be enough," Rhys replied. He set the cub down near the console. It looked up at him, calm but focused, like it understood what needed to happen, like it had waited for this moment its whole life. Vela connected her data tool to the tower interface. Sparks flew, then screens lit up. A wave of static became symbols, alien scripts, power lines. Then it asked for one thing, genetic proof. Rhys looked at the cub. "This is your moment." The cub stepped forward. It placed one paw on the scanner. Lights pulsed under its claws. A low hum filled the room. Then, one by one, the screens changed. First, an image of the Empress. Alive, holding the cub. Next, a recording of the memory Rhys had seen in the cave. The fall of the palace, the betrayal, the order to protect the heir. Then came a sound. The Empress's voice. This child is my legacy. If you see this, know that I chose to die so they might live. Let the stars judge what comes next. The console flashed green. The signal launched. Rhys stepped back as the tower lit up from the inside. A beam of bright blue light shot into the sky. It pierced through the clouds, sending the message across every frequency in the quadrant. No one could block it. No one could ignore it. The truth was now public. Then the sky answered. The royal ship that hovered above changed its path. It stopped above the tower. Hatches opened. Dropships poured out. They're still coming, Vela said. Doesn't matter, Rhys replied. The message is out. But the enemy wasn't ready to lose. Explosions shook the ground as enemy soldiers landed on the cliffs. Rhys and Vela opened fire from behind broken walls. The cub leapt into battle faster and fiercer than ever. It moved like fire, claws flashing, roars echoing through stone. They fought with everything they had. Wave after wave fell before them. But still more came. Rhys was bleeding. Vela's shoulder was hit. The cub had cuts across its scales. Still they stood. Then from the sky a new light appeared. Different ships, unknown designs. They weren't enemies. A rebel fleet. Vela laughed through bloodied lips. They heard the signal. Rebel fighters dove into the enemy lines, blasting ships mid-air. On the ground, drop pods landed with support troops. The enemy faltered. Their forces split and confused. Within minutes, the tide turned. Rhys collapsed behind a wall, panting. The cub crawled to his side and rested its head against his chest. The battle was over. Later, as the sun rose again, the rebel leader arrived. She looked at the cub, then at Rhys. You've made a lot of people angry today, she said. Rhys nodded. I protected the heir. The leader knelt beside the cub. Then you've also saved the future. The cub stood proudly now, eyes glowing. No longer just a survivor. It was a symbol. A ruler. A voice that could not be silenced. Rhys looked at the horizon. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew this. The war had started with a lie and ended with a bond.